What's up, everyone? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cassie, and you know what today is? It's Witchy Wednesday, which means we're talking about paranormal, folklore, metaphysics, whatever I decide to do that day. I decide the day of filming. Usually I'm very indecisive. Anyway, if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you dislike it, but leave a comment either way, because I love to hear what you have to say, and let's get started. So today, it's going to be an interesting one, because everyone knows of him, everyone's heard of him, everyone argues about him, and hardly anyone actually knows anything about him. So we're talking about Bigfoot. The interesting thing about Bigfoot, I personally think, is that we've had sightings for centuries, and we still are getting them. You know, there's folklores about him in indigenous cultures, honestly, like, across the world. Like, we get them a lot in the Native American societies, especially the Pacific Northwest kind of area, but I mean, we have the Yeti, we have, there's an Australian version I can't remember the name of. I'm sorry to all of the Aussies out there. But I mean, there's so many different versions of him, like, literally across the world, and in all these different, like, indigenous people's folklores and stuff, so it's really interesting that there's such a reoccurrence here. It's like the dragon, which I'm sure we'll touch on again, but there's just so many mythologies about him. He's in everything, and he has been for centuries. So, and we're still getting sightings, like, all over the place. Even in, like, Russia and stuff, the Yeti, we're still getting sightings. So, interesting thing there. So, the origin that we know of, like, the Bigfoot name, because obviously indigenous cultures don't call him Bigfoot. But one of our earliest, like, reports of him was, I think, in 1958. Some loggers found supposedly a track of him. A large humanoid track that was about, like, 16 inches long, so obviously far bigger than any person could be. Of course, when they told everyone, like, obviously people were like, oh yeah, I've seen that too, or I've run across that too. Like, everyone suddenly had their own accounting of finding tracks like that. So, you know, that happens a lot, and it's both legit and not legit. So you always have the people who are, like, wanting to join in on the fun, like, oh yeah, no, I totally saw that too, even though they really didn't. But then you also have people who just, like, saw it and discounted it because they're like, oh well, like, somebody's gonna think I'm crazy, or maybe I didn't see what I thought I saw, or whatever. And then somebody else brings it up, and it's suddenly like, oh yeah, well, now I feel safe talking about it. So that's also a big thing. Also, Bigfoot has a weird consistency in behaviors, even back then, because some of the, like, stories that were talked about with the loggers and stuff are things like large oil bins, like oil drums, being moved. My cat is joining us, apparently. He hasn't quite figured out how to, ow, jump in my lap. Just gonna... Hi, everyone, this is Simba. He's an annoyance, but I love him anyway. And apparently he's going to be joining us today, just sitting in my lap like a annoyance that he is. Moving on to Bigfoot. Yeah, so they like, saw that a big, like, 400-pound oil drum had been moved. You know, things like that. That's, like, actually fairly consistent to modern-day retellings of people who are like, oh, I encountered Bigfoot or whatever. They talk all the time about logs getting thrown, like, big, heavy things getting moved. If there's drums or whatever around, he'll beat on it or whatever, move it. Things like that. So, interesting thing, although that is also, like, a pretty generic kind of behavior, if you really want to think about it. Anyway, so they made, like, a plaster cast and took a picture and all that fun stuff, and, stop! He's rubbing up, I don't know if that picked that up, but he rubbed on my, my microphone, so. Anyway, so yeah, they made, like, a big deal about it, it became, like, news, and that's how the term Bigfoot got spread, right? Because they found this big footprint. And, it just kind of escalated from there. But there's been all sorts of sightings since then. Like, that was kind of the start of the Bigfoot phenomena. It became a big thing. I'm having difficulty moving because I have a cat in my lap. Sorry. And then you start getting more and more reports, right? More and more sightings, more and more, like, alleged evidence. That just kind of continued. And it spread. So, like, the most of it has been, like, most of the sightings and reports and stuff have actually been, like, Pacific Northwest, you know, kind of like Oregon and Washington and stuff. Those are the more common sightings for him. But, I mean, you have sightings of him even down here where I'm at in Oklahoma. So, I mean, Bigfoot down here, it's not like a cultural thing. Like, you aren't gonna run around and see people hunting Bigfoot usually, but like, there's been sightings. There's like whole areas of forest down here that people talk about being like Bigfoot territory, which is funny, because we really don't have any like old forests here. Not very many anyway. So what is Bigfoot, realistically? Bigfoot is described to be anywhere between like 7 to 10 feet tall. Typically more in that 10-foot range. They really, like, most of the sightings, in-person sightings and reports and stuff have really put him more at that size. Supposedly like an ape, basically, like somewhere between a human and a gorilla almost, but 10 foot tall, upright, walks upright, doesn't like do the gorilla walk thing typically. And from what all of the sightings and encounters and stories and stuff, for the most part, he seems to really just go after people in the woods. Like, there's very few sightings of him on roadsides. Like, there are times where just people have seen him on the road or whatever, crossing the road, but he doesn't go after vehicles from most of what we've seen, most of the sightings and stuff. It's usually people are like loggers, campers, people who built cabins deep in the woods. Which this is an interesting point for me because it leads me to my personal theory about Bigfoot, if there is any kind of Bigfoot out there. And that is that Bigfoot is really a wood spirit. But we'll get into that. So anyway, yeah, like, you'll find it mostly people who are hiking, camping, logging, doing stuff that they might not really supposed to be doing in the woods. Hunters, things like that. That's who he seems to really scare. Photobombing my video. Anyway. And, so, yeah, most of the people who've seen him have been, like, out in the woods doing, not necessarily stuff that they shouldn't do, but possibly stuff that isn't necessarily, like, that is kind of intrusive. You know, I camp and I hike and I do all sorts of stuff. I love hunting and everything like that. I don't personally hunt, but I want to learn, and I have some hunter friends that I help, like, clean the deer and stuff. I'm all in favor of, like, all of that, right? So I'm not, like, trying to say that you shouldn't do any of that, but I'm saying, like, it's a little bit more intrusive, per se, than, like, just driving by. So I wonder, like I said, this is kind of where I'm kind of wondering if he's more of a protector spirit. So, anyway, on the description of Bigfoot, yeah, so you have this big giant ape, right, supposedly. The only thing is, most of where he's spotted is, like, prime bear country. Coffee. Even here in Oklahoma, we get black bears. They're not super common, but we do have black bears. They're not very common. I've never seen one in Oklahoma, but they are there in some of the more, like, out there areas. But especially up in the Pacific Northwest, like, that is bear country, right? And so, like, people don't always realize, because they're so used to seeing bears, like, on their front feet, like, on all 4 feet, that it's very common for bears to be upright on 2 feet. Like, that is extremely common. It's a big intimidation tactic for them. They use it just to get to stuff, because they're omnivores, so they'll use it to get to higher up berries, just to see what's going on, have a higher height. Like, it is common. What is not common is for bears to walk upright, which is a big theme in, like, the spottings of Bigfoot, right? So, I'm gonna go a little bright today. I'm gonna do some, like, purple pink stuff today. You know, a lot of scientists and just people in general, skeptics, have said, like, it's probably bears people are seeing, just upright bears, because, yeah, like, a grizzly upright is about 10 foot, if not occasionally bigger. You know, grizzlies are big animals, and people underestimate, I think, sometimes how big they are. Even brown bears upright are still gonna be, like, you know, 5 foot or so. So, I think that's a perfectly, like, plausible explanation for a vast majority of Bigfoot sightings, especially when people see them, like, through the trees, you know. What I don't think it's a plausible explanation for is for the people who are seeing him walk upright, like across the road or something. A bear is not gonna do that. It's not gonna happen. Like, it's not a natural thing for them to walk upright like that. It might be natural for them to be upright, but not to walk upright. So I think that's a little bit of a flaw in a lot of arguments as far as that goes. The other thing I will say, though, is obviously you've got a lot of lies and a lot of hoaxes. Like, a lot of evidence that has been turned in support of Bigfoot has been proven to be hoaxes. You've got, like, hair samples that were turned in that turned out to be bears or whatever. You've got, you know, footprints and stuff that have been casted that have been sent in that, yeah, they've been proven not to be anything but, you know, a bear or a human or whatever. People don't think, they see, like, when they do a hoax, they can make the footprint, but when you send it to a lab, they can test for depth, for texture, for everything that you don't see, and they can tell if it was an actual literal animal or somebody in a boot, you know? And so a lot of those things have been proven to be hoaxes. Bigfoot has never been found. No compelling evidence for Bigfoot has ever been scientifically found. There's been a lot of videos, a lot of stuff. Everything that wasn't proven to be hoaxes has never been able to be confirmed as real. So the idea that Bigfoot is an actual physical animal is honestly pretty ludicrous. There are parts that I could say, yeah, I could see him being, like, you know, Alaska. There's, for anyone who's not in the US or whatever and doesn't know, Alaska is like no man's land. The vast majority of Alaska has not been touched by mankind. And it is a huge state. It is not a small state. People underestimate. Alaska is enormous. And we don't have a high population there. We don't have people exploring. It's not like other places in the country where, like, okay, yeah, we've explored the entire, like, Oklahoma, everyone has been everywhere here. Like, there's no way that if there was an actual Bigfoot living here that we wouldn't have found it, right? A physical Bigfoot. In Alaska, who the fuck knows, bro? Russia, who the fuck knows? Like, there's so much wilderness that people just don't go into there. I would buy it. I don't buy it other places, and that's where he's seen, obviously. I think he is most likely, if he does exist, which I actually do kind of believe that he does exist just because of all the folklores and all of the people who have talked about him and seen him and how extensive the history here is. I do believe that there's something there that's probably not just a bear. But do I believe that he's a physical ape running around? No. No, we would have found evidence at this point. Real evidence. A lot of, like, folklorists and paranormal experts and stuff have been debating for quite some time that Bigfoot might be a spirit or something from a different plane. There's a few different ways that people look at it. You've got some people debating that he might be a physical animal from, like, another plane of existence that is able to basically planeswalk, which is very, like, Doctor Who of us. But we don't know everything about the universe, and it is still possible. Who knows? I don't find that to be likely, but it is a theory. Personally, my theory, especially since he is so common in a lot of indigenous stuff going back very far, my theory is more or less that my cat is licking my armpit. What is wrong with you? That he is a protective spirit. And you get that a lot in a lot of different cultures, different spirits and stuff described to be bound to the forest. It's not necessarily a tree like a dryad, but bound to a certain area, certain forest, whatever, and they, you know, run out visitors they feel like are disrespecting the forest. They're very protective of it. I feel like this could possibly be that situation because of some of the behaviors that you see or hear about in the reports of him are things like running you off. You know, nobody's ever been killed by a Sasquatch. Nobody's ever been physically harmed by a Sasquatch. A lot of people have talked about being chased by a Sasquatch. I'm doing kind of small wings because my cat keeps bumping my elbow for attention. Anyway, what are some of the signs of Bigfoot, right? So some of the signs of Bigfoot are obviously sighting him. People talk about having weird smells, like really gross, like almost rotting-ish smells, or just like almost like a combination of like a rotting animal and like wet dog, something like that. Talked about like hearing growling. Banging is a big characteristic, so like they call it like tree knocking, where it's like You know, like they knock on trees and it's really loud and you can hear it throughout the entire forest. That's a huge characteristic of him. And, you know, things like that where it's like throwing rocks, throwing sticks, throwing big like oil drums, things like that are very common. The growling, there's screaming that's involved, almost sounds like coyotes, but not quite. There's some recordings out there of it, so if you really want to, you can kind of dig into it. I don't know if I can find them or if it'll be copyright or not, but if I can, I'll put it in the video. If not, you can find them. Like, it's like a scream, but it's not quite coyote-ish, but kind of similar. You know, these are all characteristics of him. People get, like, foreboding feelings, like feelings of being watched, being stalked, being, you know, almost like what you get with ghosts, actually, which is why I kind of feel like he's more of a spirit than he is anything else. But again, nobody's ever been, like, attacked by him, nobody's found him, and nobody's anything like that. So, does Bigfoot exist? And if he does, in what form? Is he physical? Is he not? What do you think? Let me know. I do think that just given how many stories he's in, dating so far back, I mean, there's, like, cave drawings of him and stuff from, like, Native Americans, tribes, and stuff. He's prevalent in a lot of folklore, and then also just we've had so many different sightings of him, and yes, a lot of them are obviously going to be hoax and lies and shit like that, but can we say every single sighting is a hoax? Especially from these people who are sticking by their guns forever and a day and have gotten belittled for it. Like, why would you stick to a hoax that long when people are literally making fun of you for believing in Bigfoot? I don't know. I do think there's some truth to it. I don't think it's an actual physical ape running around North America. I don't buy that. But I do think there's a little bit of truth to it. It'd be interesting if we ever find out. But again, I think it falls under that paranormal heading with ghosts and stuff of, like, does it exist? I think so. But we'll probably never know for sure because there's some things that are just really hard to quantify, you know, with science. So, we'll see. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!